You never really know what you're getting into when you buy somebody else's project. So like I said before, the guy that I got this truck from, he bought it to pull the 5-speed out and manual swap his Cummins truck. And when he pulled the transmission, he had cut back the harness for the reverse light sensor and the vehicle speed sensor. And I was not aware of that. Spent the last 2 hours online doing research trying to figure out why I had a 4-pin reverse light hookup. Well, that's not a 4-pin. That's an auxiliary for another O2 sensor. And it's not used, as you can tell, because it is filthy inside. There's also another one that's all the way back by the back side of the transmission that's filthy, identical to it. Both of them matching up to the O2 sensor wires that are already here. So I thought, for whatever reason, between 94 to 95, they had changed things around and used different sensors. Well, come to find out, previous owner did exactly what I would have done in his scenario and cut off the wire harness for those two sensors. But I wasn't aware of that, didn't see it. So I spent all the time trying to figure out why I had the wrong sensors, and there's only 11 months of difference between the trucks. Didn't make any sense to me. Well, tear apart the wire harness, and come to find out he had just lopped them off real tight and I couldn't see them. So I cut the harness out of the parts truck. Now I'm going to go through and get it soldered in place, because the V10 does need to have a functioning vehicle speed sensor if it has a 5-speed transmission specifically, because if it doesn't see the VSS, then when you stuff the clutch in, it doesn't know if you are decelerating or if just downshifting. And that could be a problem, because when you push the clutch in and it doesn't see the speed sense that it's slowing down, it'll pull fuel and kill the engine. So I'm going to go through and get this all wired in so we're ready to stab the transmission. One other thing I'll have to do before I stab the transmission in, now that I've gone through all the wiring and made sure everything is here, I'll get these put on, get it all wrapped up and looking good. Then I'm going to pull the clutch out of my parts truck, because my clutch is super low mileage, and this one, as far as I can tell, is almost stock. There's very little left on it. And I would be a mite upset if I start driving this truck and immediately need to pull the transmission back out and do a clutch. Prefer not to do that, if at all possible. So I'll get everything done I can now, finish this up, tidy it up, swap out the clutch, and then we'll be ready to stab the transmission in. I'll do my best here to not scratch up my fresh paint, which I already have grease stains on, so it doesn't matter all that much. Take the plunger out of the slave cylinder, just makes it easier to move. And try and snake it down in position. Over the frame, over the exhaust. Go underneath and move that real quick. Started noticing after editing my videos, I make a lot of noise when I move. I must be getting old. Every time I move something around, I'm grunting and groaning. And the clutch cancel wiring through the firewall first, then the plunger. I'm gonna go inside and get the push rod hooked up and play with these stupid little clips. I hate these things. So there's the push rod hooked up. And this is kind of a by feel thing. As would have been much easier if I had done it before I put the fenders on. But sometimes I'm not thinking. Well, once you fiddle with it long enough, it only indexes into the hole one way. Goes straight in and then quarter turn locks into place. Couple 10mm bolts will hold the reservoir in place. There we go. We're done up top. We'll put the push rod down below, just so it's ready when we get the transmission in. We can get the slave cylinder bolted in at the same time. You guys want to see how Foreman resurfaces a flywheel? That's about 3 passes with a die grinder, and I just use the red scuff pad. Been doing it this way for years. Works awesome. Alright, I'm going to stab this other clutch on, and I think we're ready to put the transmission in. I am going to grease up this pilot bearing because it's, hear the squeak? A little bit dry. We'll give that a little whiff of grease and prolong its life a while. I guess the light from the phone is enough. Glue Loctite on the pressure plate bolts. Set our impact on its lightest setting. Make sure our disc is lined up center. Make sure we got them all. Now we'll go through, because this is a V10, has 5/16 flywheel bolts, torque spec at 17 pounds, foot-pounds, not inch-pounds. And that's why you'll see me go around the flywheel 2 or 3 times. As the fingers are all sinking down, you might have a bolt that hits the torque value when you come back around to it. Because the fingers on either side of it have now tightened down, that bolt has lost its torque. So I'll go around it, you know, tightening a star pattern just like you would a tire, wheel, you know, a head, oil pan, you name it. You always go around in a circle if you can, or crisscross, star pattern. Then come back, set your torque, and recheck it again. Always recheck it again. Trust me, you do not want to have to come back in here after pressure plate bolts have broken off and this exploded. I have seen it many times, and it is not fun to put it back together. Pull our alignment tool out. We're ready for a transmission. vehicle speed sensor, four-wheel drive vacuum lines, and once we get it up a little ways, you can see right there is a reverse light sensor. We'll get that plugged in. She's ready to go up and in, minus a little tilt. Make sure we get the transfer case shifter up through the hole in the floor on the left side. It will hang up on the sheet metal a little bit. Most people just pull the whole thing off, but I was trained by a mechanic that told me, don't ever pull anything off of a vehicle if it ain't in your way. If you can work around it, work around it. He was paid flat rate, and at the time I was too. So you learn to value getting out of your way what's in your way, not anything extra. You make more money that way. There she is. She's finally home. I'm gonna start slamming some bell housing bolts. Tell me if you guys have ever seen somebody use this trick. I started doing this a couple years ago. When you're by yourself, you could always use an extra set of hands. Well, invariably you can't get the transmission to tilt the way you want. Throw a ratchet strap underneath of it and over the top of the frame rails. Tighten it up, sucks it right up into place. Works like a charm. It does kind of suck that I broke that clip, but it just means a little bit harder to get out next time. Not that I'm really concerned with it. All that matters is it is solidly locked in place and retains that cap. And something a lot of people I've seen don't do, and I really don't understand why. Once you get your cap seated in place and you get both of your clips in, it's not uncommon that it's real stiff side to side. Even brand new U-joint, brand new caps, needle bearing is good grease. It's too tight. Now, if you flip it over on its side, whale it a couple times on either side, that'll release the tension off of the caps and you get a much smoother movement. Preserve the life of the joint a little bit. If it's set up too tight, it's going to start wearing weird. All right. Slave cylinder is in. Front shield is on. Bell housing bolts tight. Wiring is zip tied up in place. Transmission cross member, skid plate cross member, skid plate, rear drive shaft. Swapped out that front yoke. I had to re-drill that bolt hole there because this drive shaft is out of an 01 going into a 95, and the bolt hole in the frame rail is about right there. So re-drilled that out over, and that was actually a good thing because I got to test out the air drill that I found in the dumpster. Works like a charm. Shout out to Drivelines Northwest, hooking me up on a complete rebuild. Got a new yoke, new U-joints, new carrier bearing, rebarreled the front half, rebalanced the whole thing. Ready to rock. Not going to put in the front drive shaft yet. The guy I got the truck from is getting it for me. Mine has blown up carrier bearing. I need to cut the exhaust mounts out of my other truck and weld them in here. And then, other than that, oh, and four-wheel drive actuator assembly and all of its lines in place, bolted down, hooked up, ready to go. Let's get inside and slam the shifter in. All right. Clutch feels good. I still have the clutch cancel bypassed right now. And there is definitely no brakes at all. Fires up. Gauges come on. The stereo started working. Don't know what's up with that. So just gotta be careful right now. I cannot see anything out of the power mirrors because they don't work. Power steering, I forgot, is absolute junk because there's almost no fluid in it and the box is puking. That's another thing we need to work on still. But I need to get it out of the shop because the floor and the shop as a whole is just a disaster. So things need to get cleaned up before I keep going. She sees the light of day. Well, reverse works. I guess we'll probably try first. Shouldn't be any reason the transmission has got issues. Clutch is nice and high, like I like it to be. Transmission shifts real smooth. First to reverse with the clutch in, no hang up. Cool. Time to go do some shop cleaning. Now there's obviously still plenty to do. Hey, the door closed that time. It hasn't been closing. I did bolt on this tailgate latch that didn't have any bolts when I got it. I adjusted the tailgate hand bolt so that it actually functions. Need to clean all the garbage out of the bed. Like I said, power steering box needs replaced. Still waiting on more paint so I can finish up the hood. You can see all the dirt, dust, everything else that's on the floor. That's all coming out of the frame rails. When you're running an impact on a truck and there's dust raining down everywhere, that's a dead giveaway that truck lived in a dusty environment. And the frame rails on these, they're boxed in multiple sections, but they're sections that are just C-channel and there's bolt holes all the way through. The frame rails are loaded with dirt. So what I'll end up doing is sticking a garden hose down each frame rail and rinsing everything out of it. And then at a later date, when I get the time, I'll lift the truck up with a forklift, get it underneath, and give it a good pressure washing. Any of that dirt that's inside the frame rail like that, over time, it's going to end up causing rusting issues. And just put this truck together. I don't want it to rust away. So yeah, I got lots more to do. So far, been a really productive day. Finished the transmission install. It does technically run and drive. First thing I got here this morning, I slammed out brakes on the wife's car, and now to do some chunker updates. Started running into an issue. I was telling you guys how before this had jumped up out of the groove. Well, it's jumped up enough times that as I've resharpened it, if you look closely, it's barely inside the groove anymore. So it was actually starting to leave strings on my chunks last night. So next video will be that guy getting fixed. Thanks for watching, guys.